Welcome back to the Senior Hour. I'm Dr. Gene Dorio on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Robin Clow is here substituting for Barbara Stearns Cochran, and we have Bill Lyons now in our guest seat. And for those of you who do not know Bill Lyons, he's been an integral part of this community for many years, volunteering and with his wife Darlene, who
at the Senior Center.
At the Senior Center, Boys and Girls Club, and many aspects of Santa Clarita. You're retired now, but the other week you were at the Senior Center giving a lecture, and a very inspiring lecture on the book that you have written. And, we want to talk about the inspiration that made you not only write a book, but how writing the book has increased your mental capacity to be able to, do the everyday things of quality of life that you need. Welcome to the show, Bill. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And writing your memoirs can be an adventure. And in the previous segment, we were talking about health issues, and I think a tie-in to keep mentally active is important. And I've had people ask about memoirs, of course, having just published one, but also things like scrapbooks or photo albums, even genealogy. And all of these things can be folded into a memoir. A memoir doesn't have to be one of these things, I was born on this date at this place and went to high school here and there. It doesn't have to be a series of facts. It can actually be kind of a fun thing.
Yes, and you really showed that when you did your presentation at the Senior Center. People came in not knowing quite what a memoir was, thinking it might be too complicated, but then you read an excerpt, and it was just so entertaining about one thing that happened to you in your childhood, and it was just so remarkably entertaining, and pretty soon everybody became inspired and enthused about recalling some of their little stories. It doesn't have to be a sequential everything that happened in your life.
Yeah, the title of my memoir, if you're ready for this, is called Zerbo Health Remover and Other Childhood Reminiscences. And the title of the book goes back to an adventure I had as a 9-year-old or 10-year-old, to where on one of those lazy afternoons I went into my buddy's kitchen with my buddy, and we started mixing up every spice we could find in the cabinet, and vinegar and peppers and baking soda and everything imaginable. And we put it in a fancy bottle, and we called it Zerbo Health Remover. Then, on top of that, we went around the neighborhood trying to sell swigs to all the neighbors. Needless to say, they were worried about their health, and we had no takers.
So you were the first big pharma. You were
big pharma. Yeah.
Next you were on NBC. But
Zerbo.
That's great. But that remembrance was brought forward in your writings, and tell us how taking that memory moved you forward, allowing you to not only just remember it, but put it together in a way that not only became a book, but an inspiration to others.
The book is a collection of 20 anecdotes, childhood anecdotes. Mm-hmm. I wrote the first one over 40 years ago, and I just was in a mood to jot something down. And that's kind of odd. I'm a retired engineer, and for an engineer to write anything, we all know that nerds are, ignorant of English. But 40 years ago, I wrote my first one. Then a year or two later, another one. And over the years, they tended to accumulate. And my wife, Darlene, thumped me on the head one day saying I should put them together as a collection and put them in a book. I'd already published 2 books, so Zerbo is my third one. And then
were the other 2 books reminiscence, or were they, refuting the laws of gravitivity?
They refuted the laws of gravitivity. Yes, my first 2 books, being an engineer and I have a passion about my profession. My first 2 books are about engineers trying to develop a product and work in business. So Zerbo is a very distinct departure for my first two.
Where'd you get Zerbo from? Was that his name or?
No, it just came out of nowhere.
Zerbo.
Yeah.
At 9 years old, creating a title, a product like that, and saying, "Hey, this will enhance your health."
Well, this friend of mine and I were buddies since we were 5 years old up until adulthood. We lived, adjoining backyards. And often we would achieve that Buddha-like state to where we could communicate without words.
Wow.
And so Zerbo just kind of appeared as if by magic, and it stuck. So now there's a book by that name.
How cool.
And this book has received 5 stars on Amazon and Goodreads, so it's a great book to read. But it's even better to hear you tell the stories orally like you did at the Senior Center presentation. You have a real gift for telling stories.
Well, yeah, thank you. The stories are short, and I don't know if we have time, but I have one that I could read if Gene, who's the boss, is amenable. It takes about 4 minutes.
Go for it.
Okay, let me get it here.
Bill Lyons.
Lyons.
One of his anecdotal stories.
Like Garrison Keller, huh? Santa Clarita's own.
Okay, this one is called Poetry in the Fog. Poetry stands as an essence of youth, an integral part of a mind unfettered by mental calluses we call experience. I don't recall anyone who hasn't tried poetry as a kid, and I know of no adults who still write poetry. I think most wish they did, and count the loss as a measure of their advancing years. Poetry is something special. Kids are special, and thus they belong to one another. My good friend Dave got a paper route delivering a local throwaway called the Herald American. I was livid with jealousy, so I got a route too. As it turned out, the job was a pain in the neck, simply because I was allergic to early morning. In the middle of the night, while I slumbered, a truck, it must have been a truck, although I never saw it, dumped a huge bundle of newspapers between the 2 palm trees that stood like sentinels in our front yard. At 4 in the morning or thereabouts, I'd stagger into the damp darkness to fold each paper, wrap them with rubber bands, and stuff them into a grubby canvas bag. How I hated it! While the thermometer might register California temperatures as moderate, the dank sea air burrowed through my jacket and flannel shirt as if they were gossamer. But something happened on those gray, foggy mornings when the mist hung heavy in the air and cradled the early morning hours in its quiet fold. The street light across the street formed a gentle halo that bathed the palms in a soft glow and made the dew-laden grass glisten. It was always quiet as a cat's breathing. Perhaps a distant truck purred briefly, but never loud enough to intrude. While I squatted on grass, the palms, halo, and paper bundle seemed to recede from reality as kid imagination burst forth, hurling sparkling visions against the gloom. Detached hands slapped each newspaper into thirds and whipped resentful rubber bands around the fold's girth, but the boy took no notice. The hands turned black from raw printer's ink as they jammed paper after paper into the canvas, but the boy's mind sailed through the drifting fog into the ether beyond. Love, glory, and song peeked between the thrashing pages, and heroes dashed about their business. Somehow, a clean bit of paper appeared. The stained fingers produced a stubby pencil, and the boy forgot about the Herald American. He wrote poetry, noble poetry. A torrent of words spewed from the tooth-pocked pencil. The boy sat cross-legged on the grass with his nose close to the paper so he could see in the gloom. Dew crept through his pants, making his legs and butt shiver with the chill, but the poetry flowed uninterrupted. Fog collected on the leaves, ran in little slow-motion rivulets to the tips, and then spattered to earth. Slinking through time, dawn turned the blackness to milk. The streetlight's halo faded and slipped into the realm of history. A bird, bolder than most, chirped his greeting to the pending dawn. The boy jolted. Late! The paper and pencil were stuffed into a pocket, and the blackened hands, my hands, thrust the last of the folded papers into the canvas sack. I heaved and struggled with the bag to sling it across the handlebars of my bike. Lurching on the pedals, I wobbled down the potholed road while the newspapers tried furiously to jam the spokes of my front wheel. A distant truck whined in the thinning fog, and the poetry grinned in my pocket. Now, looking through my papers, I find a few sheets of poetry, mostly of a later era, my college phase. Some had its roots, I'm sure, in those morning fogs, but sadly, disastrously, no sheets of poetry are smudged by printer's ink.
Oh, that is great.
Beautiful.
Wow. How
What
incredible.
a talent you have.
So, that's kind of a different take on a memoir. It's obviously not factual. You don't know what year I was born, and I'm not going to tell you either. So it's literally a collection of anecdotes, those events that tend to shape your life. When you reflect back and remember events in your life, those are the ones that mattered. So this is kind of a collection of those incidents that matter to me.
So, but at some point in your life, Bill, you said, "Oh, I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to be a nerd."
Yeah.
And you did that and retired from being a nerd, but became a poetry and fog. And to how you achieved that, and that is your latent, probably your talent that now you're able to bring forward. So your inspiration is that there are others who are out there listening to our show saying, well, maybe I have some stories to tell too. How do they, you sat down, you're an engineer, got to be computer literate. Some of our seniors are not, but there's still pencil and pen and not necessarily anything in print. But, how do they start to achieve that?
Well, if an engineer could write memoirs, anybody can. The only reason somebody couldn't write memoirs is if they have no memories at all. And I don't know of anybody like that. It doesn't really matter if the spelling is correct or the phrasing is correct or the grammar is correct. What matters is that you write. If you want to publish, that's a little different story. But if you're writing for yourself, if you're writing for your immediate family, who gives a hoot if you've misspelled a couple of words? It just doesn't matter. So I had an unfair advantage, perhaps. My father was an engineer, an electrical engineer, and I rebelled against parental authority and became a mechanical engineer. Didn't I show him? So I showed him.
You rogue, you.
My mother was an English major, and so she got me into people like Steinbeck. And I imagine, your readers or your listeners are very familiar with John Steinbeck. Incidentally, he wrote all of his work longhand. In a journal. And so he didn't have the,
Here in
word
California.
processor. Yeah, here in California.
Here in California.
So, it doesn't take anything except saying, I'm going to take an hour this morning and jot down some ideas.
Right. Anybody from any walk of life has that potential, and you've proven that. But you do put a little engineer spin on it because you can be so specific. I mean, that was what was so beautiful about your poetry, that you were able to get all of the senses included and just focus on making something wonderful out of something very small, which is kind of what an engineer, you have to be that,
mindset?
have
that mindset of looking at every detail.
There's a lot of people that would argue with that, saying that, an engineer gets locked into pi 3.14159265, or calculus. I love calculus. So, science and the arts, people say, don't go together. Well, sometimes they can.
Yeah,
but
especially with parents like yours, they must be very, very proud that you're both of them inside of you, and both have been so successful.
But still, do you think, though, Bill, that there are those who are maybe of the nerdy type who can still go beyond that might be within them? Maybe they did something for 40 years they didn't like in their job, but now all of a sudden, they can find not just inspiration, but give inspiration in providing their thoughts and ideas and experiences to others.
Very definitely. My 2 books on engineering, the objective was to get inside an engineer's life and show the frustrations and the exultations of accomplishment, seeing something materialize in steel and plastic or wires that came out of your own head. And so I have really made an effort to proselytize that. Over at the Boys and Girls Club, I do science hour for the kids every year, for every week, and try to bring along and proselytize, young kids. But, for older people like myself, I think it's crucial to jump into something new, keep the brain going, expand your horizons. For most seniors, you have leisure that a working person doesn't. So put that to use and try on something new and different and stretch yourself.
But they're
Right.
fearful. That's part of the problem, that they just don't want to take that extra step.
But that's what Bill has done, is to inspire that. Now that we've heard this, hopefully a lot of people will say, I'm going to take that first step. And we do have a journaling creative writing class at the Senior Center with Dr. Terry Crane. So, and hopefully we can get Bill there as a special guest at some
That would be
point.
nice. As a matter of fact, just this morning, I lined up a gig, kind of on your recommendation, Robin, to go talk at Oakmont.
Great.
So I'll be doing my little talk at Oakmont. My wife gave me a real severe criticism, a critique, not a criticism, a critique of my presentation for you. And so it'll be better. And so,
I can only think that it wasn't long enough. That's probably
But if you're fearful, and I can certainly understand that, getting into something totally new can be intimidating. But to cuddle up in your easy chair with a cup of coffee and a notepad and just put a few words on paper, I think almost anybody could do that. So, go for it.
And if you can take one little step forward and get on a word processor, you can avoid some of the spelling problems that some of us do have.
Yes.
So no, it's inspirational. But you didn't, Bill, you didn't have any training other than reading Steinbeck and going to classes to.
Yeah, they say.
I mean, this is highly professional to me.
They say that in order to write, you have to read, and when you're done reading, read some more. That's very, very true. And one of the interesting things, particularly about memoirs, there's no correct way to do it. There's no formula. It's not like writing a Shakespeare sonnet where there's a form. Whatever you want to do goes. In Zerbo Health Remover, my little memoir, there's illustrations inside, sketches made by an acquaintance of mine that came out of College of the Canyons. Other people, my in-laws, combine a photo album with a 75-page memoir. Wow. They just sat down and type, and folded in photos. So anything goes. Anything goes.
Well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about not just your book, but your presentation at Oakmont and how people might be able to get there to hear this presentation. I'm Dr. Gene Dorio with Robin Clow on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back to the Senior Hour. I'm Dr. Gene Dorio with my co-host today, Robin Clow on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. We're talking with Bill Lyons, who has written his memoirs, and we had you, Bill, read one of your excerpts here, and the public who's listening now might want to also hear you in person. And it was very exciting to have you over at the Senior Center, but you'll be over at Oakmont too. Is there a time or a date already prepared yet? Or
I have a time and date, but Oakmont, as you know, is a private senior apartment organization, and I'm not sure they would welcome the public, but
Margie will be happy to have the public come in.
If you know that?
I guarantee that for sure.
okay.
You're responsible.
No, don't worry. I'll take that responsibility.
you'll
The public
take-
will love it, and she will too.
All right. Based on that, and if I get sued, you know who I'm going to.
You won't.
The talk is slated for the 12th of next month at 3:30 in the afternoon.
3:30. And it usually lasts for an hour or
About an
so.
hour, maybe a little more. That's kind of what we did at the senior center.
Now, when you write, Bill, do you find that your writing now would you consider it relaxing for you? Does it, if you've had a tough day out there, do you sit down at your, and write and your typewriter and your word processor and say, hey, this is great? And does it just bring your level down a little bit in terms of maybe stress?
No. I find
That's very
writing.
succinct. That's the engineer in you.
No.
Do you want me to waffle around with the answer? I find writing challenging. It's kind of exciting. Imagine an athlete trying to get another second off his elapsed time in a race. I find I am self-critical, and I do a lot of editing. It's easy to sit down and jot off something, but if you want to polish, then you go back and back again and back again, editing and changing and whatever. I belong to one of many writers groups in town, and that's an excellent resource for you to read your material, to have your material read, to get feedback, to get critiqued. And it was interesting, when I first started in a writers group here in town that meets at Barnes & Noble, I didn't know anything. And they hammered me on the head. I mean, you have to have kind of a thick skin, to be honest with you.
I went to that group.
You did.
Yeah, and I went for probably a few weeks until they laughed at my piece, and I said, I don't know if I'm coming back. I went to that group.
You need the
yes,
thick
I was there at
skin.
Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, well.
Did you laugh at me?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so.
I wasn't there. I no longer go to that one. I have another one that I go to, but it's an important resource. And like I say, you have to have a thick skin, but you have to have a desire to improve your stuff. If that's important for you, again, for a memoir, you write it for yourself, you write it for your immediate family. Who cares about the nuances of a proper narrative? To stretch my mind, I wanted to learn to write. And I, as an engineer, you write proposals, you write technical reports. That is not fiction. And so I had a lot of learning to do, and the writers group and online resources, all kinds of materials available to help you out.
But there's nonfiction that are part of people's lives that are their reality that I think some of them should bring forward, not just, we talked earlier about our veterans being able to do that, but as well, just individuals. And I think as our seniors go, they have harnessed life, and the things they have done I think we cherish, but we don't know all about them. And
Yes.
I think this is a way.
Right, it's living history
It's
that
living
could be
history.
lost. So they should not fear being judged. They should just write.
Yeah, and in a sense, memoirs are nonfiction, but I think a lot of the principles of writing fiction apply also. But clearly one of my motivations is to leave a legacy for my kids and grandkids. Let them know, what shaped their father or grandfather. We're all influenced by events in our lives, and so I like to write about that.
That's
And the other
wonderful.
side of this is that we inspire other seniors especially to be able to get out there and think about doing some writing, because it does stretch your brain, doesn't it, Bill?
It does. And If you do any research on the web, that gets you going into new aspects. Parts of my book involve scenes in hospitals. Parts of my book involve scenes in courtrooms. So you call a lawyer, or you get online and you find out how does a courtroom scene look, or what happens if a patient in emergency has cardiac arrest. You find out about it.
That really does expand your mind to get all of that knowledge that you wouldn't have had otherwise. What are you working on now? Are you working on anything?
I have my 4th book in process.
Great. We're looking forward to that. That won't be at Oakmont, though, on
No.
on the 12th. No. All right.
Alvarez.
But so how do we get a hold of your book? How do we get it online, Amazon, and
Yes, it's available on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, all of the regular online retailers. You can Google my name, W.L. Lyons, on Amazon and go there. Certainly, Zerbo is a rather unique title, so you can Google Zerbo and find me.
Or any Z.
I also have a website you might wish to visit, and it's www.wlyons3rd.com. So that's because I'm W.L. Lyons III, so that's the reason for the 3RD.
Well, Bill Lyons, thanks for being on our show today and stretching our brains. We appreciate that. Good luck at Oakmont and in all your endeavors. You've been a true motivator. We are sponsored by Advanced Audiology and In-Home Care Santa Clarita. Listen to us next week on the Senior Hour. Now go and enhance your quality of life.